All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are in this great state of Oklahoma, one of its state parks, the Runestone Parks, near Heavener, Oklahoma. And the gentleman that is responsible for caring for this stone and seeing that vandals do not distort or destroy, I'm going to introduce you to him. He's growing up right here in this area, and I'm sure he has a lot that he can share with you, and I know you're going to enjoy it. It gives me great pleasure to present to you Mr. Lester Rowland. Lester, would you share with us?
I guess basically what I need to tell you is that the runestone that's inside this building here is probably originated from the cliffing up here that collapsed, slid off into the ravine, and as the water level dropped over the years, the sediment filled in around the rock, leaving the rock stationary in an upright position, just like a big billboard, which is probably what enticed the people who came to the area to carve on this particular rock. Back in the probably early 20s or 30s, some treasure seekers dug down in front of the rock thinking it was possibly treasure buried at this point, and just to find as they dug more rock exposed underground as on top. So they think possibly what is carved on the rock is the date November 11th, 1012, which was St. Martin's Day, as a religious holiday for the Scandinavian people. And this little enchanting ravine, which encircles the rock on three areas, which also protects it to that aspect. And then the rock is weathered with age, and because it's weathered to the point that the letters are smooth, and it being a Savannah sandstone, which is about 7 to 10 thickness of hardness of the rock, they think because the letters are smooth that it's taken possibly hundreds of years to become to that point, which eliminates probably the possibility of the Indians being carved, that the Indians did carve on this particular rock. And I don't know what else you'd like me to talk about it, but
talk about your boyhood here. You grew up in this area, didn't you, Lester?
Yeah, in the Heavener area. We used to come up here when we were kids, and it was known as Indian Rock at that particular time, and we just kind of clowned around up here all day long on the weekends, and never really gave it much thought. Then in the 60s, when it was more or less publicized as being Scandinavian background, it it kind of added a little more interest to what we grew up to in the area. And I guess that's basically all I really need to tell you, other than from this point to the northwest, which the Poto River, you can see this particular little horseshoe type ravine in the mountain, which is a shadowy part of the mountain. And if the Vikings or the Scandinavian explorers came to that point, looked up here, seeing this shadowy part of the mountain, perhaps thought it being a cave or a sheltered area, come up to investigate, no more than to find this rock in the upright position, probably left their mark there. And
well, that's fascinating. Well, thank you very much, Lester, and it's a real pleasure for you to take the time to share this with us, and all you folks that want to visit this place. It is a state park here in Oklahoma, and Lester would be most happy to show you through. Beautiful waterfalls here in the background, but also your heritage. This is your nation. We're a nation that the people control this nation, basically, when we protect those rights. And it's wonderful when you see these people that their lives are dedicated to protecting our heritage, the Americas. America, BC, yes, as you know from Albuquerque, we have found some stones back in even to before Christ walked this earth. This happens to be a fixed date, and makes a very interesting story, which we will continue to share with you as we show you the rune letters. Rune is a word that means secret or hidden. A priest language in the beginning, and then as scholars and cryptographers and so forth have translated these letters. We find it fascinating. We want to share that with you. Again, Lester, God bless you, and we just hope a lot of these folks will come see you now. I'm sure they will. She's down to earth and honest in your work, and I really appreciate that.
I've talked to her and they visitors come in and I can answer the question, but that'll worry me to the point that I'll call her and ask her, and she always has answers.
Well, that's great.
I'll move you back up.
Well, God bless. We appreciate you. I'll look forward to getting back up and talking with her. That'll make my day.
All right, great.
Thanks, Lester. And here we have this beautiful slab, a signboard. It's approximately 12 feet or taller. Just a billboard naturally placed here by our Father. And when these travelers arrived, what a billboard ready for them to utilize. The inscription found on this stone contains letters from runic alphabets used by Germanic peoples of Northern Europe from the 3rd to the 13th centuries. The 8 runes are not from the same alphabet. 6 symbols are taken from the 24 rune alphabet in use around the 4th century. Eventually, the alphabet became condensed in the 9th century to only 16 syllables. The 2nd and 8th runes are taken from the latter alphabets, translated to English equivalents using both layman, however, using both alphabets rather. The inscription reads G-A-O-M-E-D-A-T, which at first glance has no apparent meaning to the layman. We could make nothing from that. However, Alf Mung, a noted cryptographer, interprets the symbols rather, to represent not letters, but the numerical equivalents of their positions in the ancient medieval alphabets. Those values are 7, 10, 24, 20, 19, 23, 4, and 12. These numbers alone are combined with others tell in 8 separate ways the day and the year of the inscription. And it is the 11th of November, 1012 AD. It's the various tablets, numbers, and values used in medieval times to figure dates confirm the secret message of this inscription. This people that came up the Arkansas River from the Mississippi River and setting this date, I want you to visualize the size of this stone, realizing that I stand 6'4", and with a hat on, I'm probably standing something like 6'6", with boots and everything. Note how far above my head, about 15 feet tall, and the base is still 2 feet below me. You will note that the state has enclosed this stone, encased it well, whereby it is protected. And it's real sad, but the plexiglass, even on the outside that protects the stone, already has graffiti upon it. Isn't it sad that this great nation, where we have so few of these remaining the history on the rocks, yes, scratched in. A lot of people say, well, American history doesn't go back. Friend, that's it. That's it. And it must be protected, and it is so important that when we see our young people taught that Columbus discovered America in 1492, what are we going to do about November the 11th, 1012 AD, when one of these longboats managed to come up the Mississippi, Arkansas, the Potomac, and we're going to be sharing other stones from this area that documents the fact that these people remained here, and later in this documentary. But what a fantastic way for our Father to preserve and to let us know that He is in control, documenting truth even in the living stones, in nature itself, and man continues to confuse our children. Let us document facts and take them to our children. Here we are, Heavener, Oklahoma, the runic stone, dated November the 11th, 1012 AD. Now, dear one, you are there. Okay, it is thought by all that probably The location you're looking at now is where the rock originally was and slid to the position to perform a billboard for centuries. You know, many might say, well, if they walk in our natural area, how beautiful it is. And they say, if these hills could just talk. Beloved, the hills do talk. It's just that people don't listen. The marks that have been left by our people in their migrations, they talk. And not only do they talk, they say a lot. People just don't listen. How beautiful it is. You know, in investigating this, various people and down through the years, a Norwegian, I believe he was a Norwegian cryptographer, finally found this date with the word rune meaning secret, hidden. The priest, of course, hiding the language in earlier times whereby the layperson did not have an opportunity to learn. But then, as the cryptographer explains and interprets the date, then we find that from Greenland, in the year about 1008, 1007, 1008, that there were 4 ships, 4 longboats of Norsemen that came to New England to establish a new colony. The colony was a failure, and 3 of the boats returned in the direction of Greenland. 1 sank, 2 made it safely. The 4th was never heard from again. It doesn't take too much imagination to know that there were not that many Norsemen in the Americas at that time, especially that this date, on this sacred day for the Scandinavian holiday, November the 11th, St. Martin's Day, that this date would be scratched. Did it mean also that perhaps one of them passed away near here? It's possible. But with those markings, that language, a language that was not known in this nation, and not even we could not even interpret it, except for a few short years ago, if we call 20 years a short time ago. But how precious. Yes, people say, if these hills could talk, they do, dear friend. Are you listening? Our Father created these hills. He created the souls of those that have migrated this earth down through the years. Approximately 900 years ago, plus, a group of men came to this spot from Europe, the European continent. They were here. They were here exploring, as our people always have explored, but they were leaving the signs. Let us accept God's history in stone as it is written, as God would have us know and understand the migrations of our people. Some of you have a destiny, and that destiny can be nailed in your mind, sealed in your mind, by the fact that they were here 900 years ago searching for freedom, for peace, and perhaps for God in their understanding of Him. They never made it back. The 4th boat was never heard from again. Did they marry someone in the local area here? That is to say, one of the tribes? Did the navigator pass on here? We'll go more into this detail as we go through this documentary. Well, what a blessing to see the billboard placed by our Father, not by the hands of man, to allow the rocks to talk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Kerr Museum in Poto, Oklahoma. It's a place I want all of you to remember well because there are artifacts here that you just can't pass up. We're still with the runestones, plus we're possibly going to have an opportunity to show you some other things as well. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Laird King of Poto, and he is the curator of this museum at this time, and I'm sure he welcomes all of you that can, when passing by this way, to stop in. Mr. King, could you just explain some of these things, and thank you for your hospitality of inviting us in.
Well, thank you for coming. One of the scopes of this museum, of course, is the Runestone story. And along one wall here we have panels telling the story of the Vikings who might have been in this area. And we have some actual stones here that were found in the area, in addition to the larger stone at Heavener, Oklahoma, which is world-renowned and visited by many people. These smaller stones, of course, could be taken out of their site where they were found, and we have the good luck of having them on display in cases here in our museum, along with explanations of their meaning and possible translations of the letters, the runes, on the stones, which came from ancient Scandinavian alphabets, two particular alphabets. Past 50 years, Gloria Farley of Heavener, Oklahoma, has studied and advertised the large runestone at Heavener, Oklahoma, which is on a huge stone too large to move. Since its discovery, which could go clear back until about 1830, other stones have been discovered in this area. This stone right here, the Poto runestone, was found on a spot about 10 miles away from the Heavener stone, and one of the translations of the message on the stone dates it at a time 5 years later than the Heavener runestone. There's a picture here of the two boys who discovered the Poto stone, and one of the boys still comes in here. He is a grown man now. He's working on his master's degree in Tahlequah, the school at Tahlequah. The next stone there is the Shawnee stone, which was discovered in a stream east of Shawnee several years ago, and it represents a date 10 years later than the Heavener runestone, and apparently written by the same rune master. These runes are letters from two Scandinavian alphabets dating back around and before the year 1000. And various translations have been proposed for these stones. And the more you're around them, the more you feel like the Vikings actually were here. The large letters in the background up there are actual size and shape of the stones from the Heavener runestone. Gloria Farley is still alive, still very active in promoting the idea of the Vikings in North America, along with other pre-Columbian explorers. And she has discovered many markings throughout this area, and especially out in the Oklahoma Panhandle and in southeastern Colorado, that might well have been placed there by early Viking peoples coming into this country.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. King, for sharing with us in this, and we're going to ask you to explain some more things that you have here. But these two stones that are a part of, I feel, the Runestone in the Runestone Park there at Heavener, Oklahoma, does in fact prove that the Vikings, the Norsemen, were here. Their alphabet, a lot of people, again, and perhaps it may sound I'm repeating myself, many people say, if these hills could only talk. They do, my friends. The Vikings, who are they? The Vikings were the descendants of a vigorous and aggressive people from the south who conquered Scandinavia about the time of Christ. They were tall and blond and robust, and at home they were self-sufficient farmers who lived along the fords and valleys throughout Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. The shaded areas of the map show the distribution of the population in Viking Age Scandinavia. You see Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. And Mr. King just stated that about the time Christianity began to work its way up, it even began to show a bit of an influence on these Vikings. This is where they came from, touching base in Greenland and then coming into New England and many migrating later. Again, here's the Heavener Runestone. The existence of a large upright rock bearing an inscription has been common knowledge in the Heavener area for a long time. It was known as Indian rock until Mrs. Gloria Farley, a native of the area, discovered that the symbols on the rock were Scandinavian runes. And of course, you know the rest of the story as we've talked of it and how precious it is, and we are indeed thankful to that lady for her input to archaeology and to the languages. Evidence of Viking explorers in North America. You know and I know that it's all over. But artifacts, inscriptions, and settlement sites found in the United States and Canada provide evidence of pre-Columbian exploration of North America by Vikings, according to most archaeologists. Liaz Akhmeto's site furnishes irrefutable proof that Norsemen were in America centuries before 1492. However, every other piece of evidence shown on this map is still being questioned as proof of the presence of Norsemen in other areas of North America. We still have those doubters. Is it that they choose not to write? Is it that they choose not to change history books? Because even children at this time, we see here the picture of a Viking ship. They were indeed a sturdy vessel, able to cross that Atlantic as well as even the cold winter times. The Viking ship was fitted with one large square sail and a dozen or more pairs of oars. A lot of rowing to bring them up the Mississippi River. The Vikings reached almost every part of the world known in their period. They swarmed along the coast of Western Europe, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and into the Mediterranean Sea. They visited Italy, Spain, Morocco, passed through Russia to the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, ranging westward, and they discovered Iceland, Greenland, and America. We see that the jump there is a small jump for the people that covered, certainly the area that they covered. Certainly a brave people. Now, the runic writing itself, you know that the word runic means secret and or hidden. And the priests originally were the only ones that knew or understood the alphabet, therefore keeping captive those that they preached or the members of their parish. And let's look at this runic, this runestone here from Broby, Uppland, Sweden, from the 11th century. Before the Latin alphabet came north with Christian missionaries, the Vikings used runic symbols which were generally carved on stones. And the Vikings believed the runes to have magical powers, and those using runes frequently shrouded their meaning with mystery, therefore the meaning of the word. The old Germanic 24 rune alphabet was one of the first, and you see a diagram there of it. And then in use about 100 to 900 AD, revived again in about 1600 AD, the 16-rune medieval alphabet being Danish. Now you will remember that in the stone at Hivna, we have both, that is to say, Scandinavian as well as the runic influence, making it exceptionally interesting. How fascinating. Do the mountains hold still? No. The mountains speak, dear one. The mountains have a message for you if you listen. Okay, the runestones in Oklahoma, they're 4 stones bearing inscriptions that are generally accepted as runestones, have been found in Oklahoma. Their locations are shown on this map. You will note Tulsa, Shawnee, Poto, and Heavener. The trip made down around the tip of Florida, the Key West, up through the Gulf, up the Mississippi, the Great Arkansas, and then the Poto River into this area. The travels, the ancient travelers, the Vikings were here, you bet. They left their calling card. And then the Shawnee Runestone. This is one that you had prior seen there in the case, the actual stone itself. The Shawnee Runestone was found in August of 1969 by Jim Estep in the Larkin Meadow housing development about a mile from the North Canadian River. Mr. Estep picked up the stone, took it home with him. Not until several months later did he realize that the characters on the rock were runes. Mr. Alf Mung concludes that the inscription on this stone is also a cryptogram containing the date November the 24th, 1024. This date is 12 years later than the date Mr. Mung believes contained in the Heavener inscriptions, and several years later than that of the Poto inscription. Makes one wonder why they did not return, because from this we know that they spent quite some time in this area. Was it one boatload, or were there others? Did they meet with the people south of here? That is to say, at the Sparrow people, the mound people there? Well, we'll have more on that in the very near future, and you're going to find it a very a very pleasant surprise as we go deeper into the mountains that do talk, if you take a moment to read the signs. I hope you've enjoyed this, and it certainly has been a pleasure bringing this to you from the Kerr Museum in Poto, Oklahoma.
While you're here today, I'd like to point out some of the spiral mound collection that we have in the Kerr Museum. This is mostly shells, carved shells, beads that are carved from shells. Now, as proof that the Spiro people were traders in a trading center here, these shells are only found along the west coast of Florida. So they were brought up the river system to the Spiro area and perhaps traded with other things from here. The beads are made from the center of the shell that runs down and naturally has a hole through the middle of it. So they were kind of a natural bead when they were cut from these centers. The spiral mounds were broken into and exploited by people who didn't know much about archaeology. In the beginning, they went in with mining methods, which included bulldozing and blasting, and they didn't excavate these mounds scientifically at all, therefore much knowledge was lost. Later on, when their lease on the area expired, the University of Oklahoma and its archaeologists came in and proceeded with some scientific investigation. These artifacts we have in this particular museum came from Mr. William Beach and another gentleman who went to the area after the archaeologists were there and sifted through the things that remained and brought out thousands upon thousands of beads and other pieces that had been overlooked by the archaeologists and made their own personal collection, which they later gave to the Kerr Museum, and are the things that you see here today. We have more Spiral Mounds artifacts on display here than they do at the Spiral Mounds Park. But the park does have artifacts now stored or displayed at the museum in Norman, Oklahoma, and as soon as they have a suitable building at Spiral, they will bring more Spiral artifacts back to that area. We're thankful that we have these to show, and hope that it gives you an insight into the early population of this area, the way they lived, the area in which they lived, and the state of their art, their carving on the stones, which represents facets of their life, and from it can be guessed some of their ceremonials, some of their religious practices. The stone on that side could be a grave marker. This stone has been interpreted to be a boundary marker. In other words, pre-Columbian people coming over here would mark out an area as their own, and where we find one boundary marker, it's guessed that perhaps there are 3 other markers marking the extent of their property. These stones might be marked with other alphabets than the runes. For instance, they're similar to old Phoenician alphabets, or old Iberian alphabets, or old Carthaginian alphabets. Also, the writing on the edge of the stone over there is a form of Ogham, which occurs in Ireland and Scotland, and modern people have discovered how to read and interpret these marks. You notice the marks go around the edge there. That's edge Ogham, or corner Ogham, and can be translated into today's language by some people who study these things.
Okay, Mr. King, we indeed do thank you for sharing this, your museum and your knowledge with us concerning these things. And I know that all the people that are traveling that want to stop by the Kerr Museum, that you want to make them welcome, right?
Right, we do.
All right, so there you have it, first hands, friend, a personal invitation from Mr. King to stop by and see these beautiful artifacts here at Poto at the Kerr Museum. I know you'll enjoy it. Okay, we're going to shoot in here on the Heavener Runestone, and perhaps you can see by the size of the stone compared to the people that are even in the picture there. And as we had stated, many people, when they've been in an area for quite some time and they know it's an ancient place, they will say, if these walls could only talk, or if these rocks could only talk. They do talk, dear friends. They have a great message for us. The Scandinavians, the Norsemen, the Vikings, as they traveled this great nation, the Americas, that is to say from Canada to Central America, leaving these marks, these stones, these messages. Why does a man write a message on a stone? So that people will know that message, people will know that they were there. It is recording history. History meaning his story. And the gentleman that placed the markings on these rune stones, it was their story. And the mountains, the rocks do speak. And we just thank the Heavener and the Poto area, the Kerr Museum, and the State Park there in Heavener for allowing us to share these things with you. And if you're planning a vacation this year, you want to know a good place to go, you know, in these documentaries I always say, America, you are there. There's one thing better than that. It's good to bring you along with us via video, but make the trip yourself. Enjoy your American Christian heritage, a heritage that shall be forever until even our King returns. He talks, but yes, as he stated in Acts chapter 2, that there would be signs both on the earth and from the heaven. Many people stumble over the signs that are left concerning the migrations, concerning many other things. See that you do not fall in that category. Visit America. You don't need to go to a foreign land to see the great things of history. We're still exploring, and America is still a young nation, for there are many things yet to be found and discovered. See that you enjoy this great nation of ours. Practice your rights as a citizen of it. Listen to the mountains, listen to the stones. And of course, how about a plug here? Listen to your Father as well as he guides you. But you're always welcome in this area. I must say that in all the places we've traveled, in the rural area, we have as friendly a people as I've ever met here in this area. I know that every citizen will make you feel welcome as you visit these sites, and we just thank them from the bottoms of our heart. All right, bless your hearts. What a pleasure it was to visit those places and to bring that to you. I want to read from, if I may, the Epigraphic Society, President Barry Fell, a small article concerning the runestones. I think you should know what other people believe they should be translated as for your own information. And this is by Paul H. Chapman from Georgia. And this is the article, real quickly. Your readers who are not familiar with Old Norse may wonder how two of us derived two different translations from the Heavener, Oklahoma runestone. That is to say, Chaplin's and Nielsen's articles in volume 16 of the ESOP, this particular publication. Runic writing inscriptions developed through three distinct phases, and the letter symbols in one sometimes represents a different sound in another. For example, the symbol similar to our asterisk as an AE in the first phrase, but representing H in the second. With time, Old Norse split into 5 languages: Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Farsi, with multi-dialects and spellings. This was further complicated by the use during the middle phrase of a shortened alphabet with only 16 symbols, representing the previous 22, now 26. The D and the T were the same, I and E, K, and G, and so forth. It is for these reasons that the runologist stressed the need for translations to be in context. I feel that Nielsen's translation, Gloom's Valley, in other words, Gloom's Valley was the translation by Nielsen for the Heavener stone. While possibly is not in context, the stone sits on a mountain, not in a valley. Gloom is not a known Old Norse name, but is instead a postulated derivative. My translation, to invite barter, that's barter as to trade, would seem to fit the context. The inscription is in large letters on a huge boulder in a prominent location. The Old Norse people were wide-ranging traders at this time in history. Both words can be found in the Old Icelandic dictionary. Now, that's fine, and I want to submit that as everyone has a right, and you need to know those translations. However, inasmuch as the 3 stones were found in the Heavener area and surrounding towns, with the dates in Norse, in the runic rather, to being many years apart, not many, 8, 5 years, and then 12. I feel there's a very possibility that the navigator or the leader died and they intermixed. And these were, inasmuch as the runic rune alphabet was first possessed by priests, and the fact that it was used for on the dates of religious holidays, I feel rather that it was probably for that reason. With 4 boats having left the Norwegian coast, 2 returning, 1 sinking, and 1 disappears, and then in that same date range have them show up in Heavener, I find very interesting and tend to go with that. Now we're going to Tennessee. 8,000 years, the people you're about to see claim people were in the Tennessee Valley in Loudoun County, and they also communicated with as far north even as Newark. I want you to enjoy this. I think you will realize our people and other people have been here a long, long time. It gives me pleasure to welcome you to the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum, dear ones. Here we are. I know you're going to enjoy this fascinating documentary on the life of the Cherokee. It is remarkable that the Trail of Tears originated very near this place where we're at, Loudoun on 75, the main artery south of Knoxville, then Highway 72 to this wonderful place. If you're ever in this area, certainly it's a must on your list. To make you acquainted with Sequoyah. Sequoyah, he that designed the alphabet of the Cherokee Nation, will take you through step by step, and I know you will be fascinated at the ingenuity of a people as they came forth and left their mark over many thousands of years, they and other people, in this great Tennessee Valley. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let's begin our tour through this Birthplace of Sequoyah Historical Museum. I think you'll enjoy it. It gives me great pleasure at this time to present to you Carol Hamilton, a man certainly that takes great interest and is the director, the Birthplace of Sequoyah Historical Museum. I'm just going to turn over to Carol, and I think you'll find it fascinating, some of the events, that magic number 7 that he has to share with you. Carol, God bless you. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you coming. We're really honored by your presence being here, and appreciate what you're doing for the museum and for the cause of Cherokee history. As I was explaining to you earlier, it's fascinating how many times the number 7 coincides with Christian living and in the history of the Cherokee Nation. And that was incorporated into the design of our museum when it was, the architects designed it. They they talked to some Cherokee historians and told them about that, and so they designed that into the museum. And if you'll look here in the lobby, this pole structure that you see in the lobby, you can see it overhead and all the way down the lobby, and it's really quite striking as you come up to see the museum. And it's kind of a takeoff on the old Cherokee lodgepole design, some of the earlier structures. And the number 7 significance in this particular state is that on each side of our lobby, on the inside, on each side, the right and the left, there's 7 poles for the number 7. On each side of the walkway, as you come into the building and as you exit, there's 7 poles, 5 in the front and 2 in the back. So there's 7 on each side. And so you notice that there as you look out the front door, and then as you exit the back door, it's the same type of thing. So there's 7 on each side. And then also our window design, we feel like is pretty unique. And if you look just inside as you start through the exhibit area here, you'll see one of several sets of windows. And along the bottom of these triangular sets of windows, you'll see 7 panes of glass across the bottom. Each one of these sets of windows has 7 panes, which again is representative of the 7 clans of the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee Nation had 7 clans, and so that's what we're representing with these 7s and these different instances is a tribute to each of the 7 clans. Also, again, across the top of the exhibit area on the right side, you'll see 7 panes of glass across the top of the exhibit area. So there's just 7 like that in the museum, and again, that's another takeoff on the 7 clans. And if you just step around the corner here with me, I want to show you our theater. And our theater is where we try to tell you about the story of the Cherokee Indians today. Cherokee history tells us that each Cherokee council house always had 7 sides. And as you look at our theater here, you'll notice that the theater has 7 sides to it. So it's not an accident that it was designed this way. Also, when the council houses were built, they were always built so that the sun would shine first or only directly in the front of the council house, which is where the chief always sat. And so the only place in our theater that direct sunlight hits is in the front. If we can turn these lights down just for a second, it's not a very sunny day today, but you can see that the only beams of direct sunlight that come into the theater hit right in the front of the theater, which is where the chief would sit were this a council house. So that's another instance where the 7 is incorporated into the design, and the fact that the sunlight hits right in the front, I think, is very prominent. And as I said before, it wasn't an accident. It was designed that way to pay tribute to past generations of Cherokees. So we just thought these were a couple facts you might enjoy knowing about the museum, and there's something you don't catch on first glance, but it's something that means a lot to a lot of people after they find out it's here. And these pictures here that you see are an aerial view of the council house site in Chota. And when Henry Timberlake explored this area in 1762, why, he said that this looked like a large mountain. This council house was large enough for 500 people. So it was kind of built like an old amphitheater. The seats were staggered and raised one above the other. And all these small holes you see here are post holes that actually supported seats and benches. And in the center there was where the central fire hearth was in the council house. And today, on the exact spot where Chota was, while the Cherokee Nation has erected a monument to past generations of Cherokees, and maybe later in the film you'll get to see that spot, but this is the only spot that's still where you can still walk today and experience that history. And so this is where the actual council house was at Chota. If you look here at these other pictures, you'll see an artist's rendering of what some of the villages would have looked like. There was paired summer and winter houses. Each family had a summer house and a winter house. And they're at the height of Cherokee civilization, well, there was probably 250 families, so you're talking probably 1,200 people in this one village. So it was a tremendous establishment. It was just up the river from the village of Tanasi, which is where the state of Tennessee got its name, from a Cherokee village called Tanasi. So that's another, I think, important fact. But this map here you see is the map of Henry Timberlake that he did in 1762 when he explored this area, and he labeled all the major Cherokee villages on the bends in the river. And this map is the same map that archaeologists used 200 years later to find these village sites. So the accuracy of this map was astounding. This is the one they used to find these villages when they did the study. So that's another important fact about the museum I thought you might want to know. If you look here at this particular exhibit, you're going to see a picture of Sequoia and his daughter, Ayoka, with the backdrop of the Great Smoky Mountains in the background. And in 18 '09, Sequoyah began work on the syllabary, and it was only the 6th time in the history of mankind that an entirely new alphabet had been created. And normally it had taken scholars hundreds of years to do it, but Sequoyah was able to do it unassisted in 12 years. So I think this was a phenomenal feat, and he had all kinds of opposition. His people thought at one time he was crazy. They thought he was a witch. His own wife at one time even burned his work, but he persevered, and in 12 years' time he was able to create a writing system that helped his people become literate and helped them be able to communicate. And this was to become more important a few years later after the removal of the eastern Cherokees to the west. That gave them a way to communicate with their relatives that had been moved out to the west. But this picture we see here is Sequoyah dressed in traditional Cherokee dress, and he's teaching the syllabary to his daughter Ayoka. And we see him here with a stick, scratching the symbols of his syllabary in the dirt. And this was particularly important because when Sequoyah proved his syllabary work to the tribal council, he used his daughter Ayoka, and they wrote a message on a piece of paper. They made Ayoka leave and took her several miles away. They made Sequoyah write a message on a talking leaf, and then they brought Ayoka back, and she was able to read the message word for word, just exactly what the tribal chiefs had told Sequoyah to write. So this proved to him that it worked. So here you see a picture of where Sequoyah taught the syllabary to his daughter. I'd just like to take a moment here to show you an example of the Cherokee syllabary, and we spoke earlier about Sequoyah's creation of it. And here you see the Cherokee syllabary illustrated. And when Sequoyah completed it in 1821, it had 86 symbols, and later it was shortened to 85. But each symbol that you see here is for a particular sound of the Cherokee language. And unlike the white man's language, while we have to take several letters to make a vowel sound, each symbol of Sequoyah's syllabary stands for a particular syllable of a word. So the Cherokee language is so extensive that he still had to have 85 symbols to be able to cover it all. But the first efforts that he did, some of his earlier efforts had as many as 250 and 300 symbols. So he had to shorten it several times before he got it right. But this syllabary is still used today in every tribal council meeting, while they record all the tribal meetings in the syllabary and in Cherokee and in English so that it can be preserved for future generations. So Sequoyah's alphabet's still being used today. And if you look right here, you're going to see an example of Cherokee Phoenix, which was first published in 1828. And it was the first bilingual newspaper ever published in the United States. And it was part in the syllabary in Cherokee and part in English. And this just further illustrates, I think, how civilized the Cherokee were prior to the removal. And because of Sequoyah's invention of the syllabary, they were able to form their own constitution, their own tribal government, and it's just another facet of history that shows us that the Cherokee indeed were the principal people. Again, if you look here at this particular exhibit in the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum, what we've tried to do here is to show the students or show the casual observer how an archaeological dig is prepared. And here at this picture on the side here at the front of it, you'll see an actual picture that was taken when they did a dig, and you'll notice the different colors of the stratus of the earth as they went down, and each particular color denotes a different period of history. And when they went down another foot, why, it was practically, probably another 200 or 300 years. And on the exhibit here, you'll see the top layer, which shows the topsoil, and each time you go down, for example, there, when you see the A, that would probably have been the historic period, maybe just 200 years ago. And each of these dark spots here are post holes that they would have found showing different campsites or maybe village sites during that area. And as you go down into the C part over here in the other corner, while you see a cooking pit that was probably during the Archaic period, which probably would have been 700 or 800 years ago. And at the bottom point here, we see probably a Paleo-Indian campsite, which means we're probably talking in the area of 11, 12, 1500 years ago, showing how the Native Americans lived in this area. The post holes, the cooking pit, all of these artifacts and tools here show how they lived. So this exhibit here shows you how archaeologists can obtain this information just by digging in the earth. So this is really an example of an archaeological dig.
All right, be sure and tune in tomorrow at this same time to hear the completion of this documentary. You are now on the east end of the Trail of Tears. We will end up at the west in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. I know you're going to enjoy it. Again, be sure and tune in this same time tomorrow night to see the last hour of this documentary. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Our Father and this nation, open your eyes and enjoy our great nation.
And the main characteristic of the woodland period was the appearance of pottery in East Tennessee and in the Cherokee lifestyle. And here again, if you look at these particular pieces of pottery and you can focus in on them, you're going to notice some unique designs. And these impressions were made on the pottery while it was still wet. And some of these same patterns that you see on this pottery today are that was probably 500-600 years old, most of these pieces are, is still used today. And it's really unique the way that these same patterns have been passed down through generations. And we can show you pieces of pottery in the gift shop that were made last year that still use this same design, some of them. So I feel like this is really unique. You'll start to notice different designs in the arrowheads here. During the woodland period, they started getting away from the stem tips and started getting into the triangular shape, the more traditional shape of arrowheads. And so every arrowhead you find is not shaped the same way. And the shape of them has a particular significance as to archaeologists being able to tell us what period of history they came from. And here again, we're going to see some stone tools. And before the historic period started, before that the white man came, the Yone came into this region, the Cherokees had to use stone tools. And it took a Cherokee man 8 months to make a canoe using a stone tool. But after the white man came and the Europeans and they started trading for metal tools, they could make the same canoe in 5 weeks. So the Cherokees were very advanced and very smart, and they learned the advantages of using the white man's tools. So here we see stone tools and stone axes that they used before they got those metal tools. Now this small piece you see here is made out of soapstone, and this is a net weight. And when the Cherokees would fish, while they took all the men in the village, went to the river and they'd find a shallow place in the river where there were shoals, and they would take a net and they would build a trough down through the river, kind of like a funnel, and the other men in the village would go up the river maybe a few hundred yards, go across the river and drive the fish like cattle down into this funnel, and there'd be people on the lower side with nets to catch the fish, because when they caught them they had to dry them and keep them sometimes for months at a time. So the Cherokees, which was in their nature, they didn't waste anything. When they killed a deer or killed any animal, they used every piece of the animal. It was part of their heritage and their tradition and their religion not to waste anything, because they felt like the Great Spirit put everything here for their use. And so this is a net weight that they used to sink their fishing nets. Over here you're going to see some drill points, and here we see evidence some pieces that came from Hopewell up in Ohio. So this tells us that the Cherokees had a distinct trade network even back 700-800 years ago, 600-700 years ago. Archaeological evidence points to a distinct trade network between southeastern Indian tribes. So these are just a few facts that you might want to remember when you see this exhibit. You might be interested in knowing when you look at these exhibits, exactly what kind of process the archaeologists use in being able to determine how old these pieces are. And this is one of the first exhibits in the Sequoia Museum, and it focuses on the Paleo-Indian period, which is several thousand years ago. And when the archaeologists from University of Tennessee did this study, they found evidence of Native American civilizations here several thousand years old. And you're going to notice as you look at these different pieces how crude these tools are. Notice that they're chipped off in big flakes, and these are cutting tools here, and you'll see how crude they are. And if you went on around the museum and looked at later periods like the Archaic and Woodland period, the same pieces are much more advanced. They got better at making them. They were able to make them smoother. So these are very crude, but they do show that the Native Americans lived in this area several thousand years ago. But the process that archaeologists use is a process called radiocarbon dating. And they can take a particular piece, a rock, whether it be a rock or a skeleton or whatever, and through an archaeological process, as I said, called radiocarbon dating, they can approximate within a few years exactly how old that individual piece or artifact is. So that's how we've determined by looking at our exhibits how old they are. Here again you see a piece, an example of an old cooking pit that was preserved by heat. And in another one of our exhibits we have corn cobs that are probably 800 or 900 years old. It's kind of like charcoal, the same type of effect that they were preserved through heat. So this is a process that we use to tell us how old these things are.
Okay, here we have archaeology and recovery. We see here some of the newer, more modern methods. As you see this particular board, as we make a sweep of it, you see machinery is used at times. You'll see a backhoe there. And of course, when we come upon something then very interesting, the machines are stopped, and such as a burial, an actual burial. And we see this machinery that then sifts that is found for each precious fragment that takes us into those years gone by, where we try to understand the peoples of this great nation in the Americas, their customs, their habits. There's one way we learn these things. That's through archaeology. Now, we have men that might say certain things thus and argue with the creation of Almighty God. But as long as there are men willing and women willing to go out and find the precious artifacts that lets us know that people, even in the past, knew there was a God. Those people were taught by people that you're familiar with as they traveled the world, as Christ himself, the Savior of the world, made himself known to many that perhaps are not even recorded. There seems to be telltale signs that appear and show up. Archaeology, the history in the soul. Okay, one of the things here, this beautiful valley, Tennessee Valley, some of that original portion of the Cherokees, and we see this infamous Trail of Tears, both tracks. I want you to note we're rebroadcasting to satellite directly right now, feeding down into 30 million homes from Canada all the way to Brazil. We're coming to you from the end of the Trail of Tears. And a relative of mine, old Alfalfa Bill Murray, was a spokesman for this great nation, even as Oklahoma in the territorial days, and came on up into the state now of Oklahoma. We'll be coming to you from Tahlequah, the Cherokee Museum there as well. But from this heartland, from the beginning, from the earth, the womb of all, I want to thank Carol for inviting us into the museum as director. Carol, it's been a real pleasure. We appreciate your hospitality, and it's real good to see this wonderful, wonderful museum.
Well, thank you. I want to say again, we are proud you got to come, and we feel like this is a story that needs to be told. the story of the Cherokee people and of Sequoyah, his great accomplishments. And here you can find out where it all started. And this is tribal land. This is the only tribal land in Tennessee, the only Indian-owned historic attraction. And we want to invite each one of you to come and visit the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum and experience with us the heritage and traditions of the Onawee, the principal people. And indeed, the Cherokee were the principal people. And we just want to thank you for coming, and we wish you the best. And we just hope that you'll tell somebody else about the museum, because we need all your support.
Amen. I know that all of you are going to want to do that. Take advantage of Carol's offer. Just a beautiful place. What a beautiful spot that God has placed this garden here in this reservation land, tribal lands. You don't want to miss it. Keep touch with the heritage of these great Americas. Carol, again, God bless you and thank you so much. All right, as I say, many miles under the old bridge and over the bridge since we left Loudoun County in Tennessee, the birthplace of Sequoyah. I want you to take note, we are now in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. I'm going to introduce some very wonderful folks, and I can say the same as I said for the folks in Loudoun, Tennessee. You're going to enjoy visiting the heritage, to taste the history itself of this great nation of ours. You see behind me a interesting thing. I'm going to let the director of this museum come in, tell you a little bit about this, introduce himself, and then introduce a very lovely lady that will be with us here through a portion of this museum. John, would you come in, please? John Justice, the Director of Marketing. John, welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel and the National Christian Network, and thank you for being so kind to allow us to come through this wonderful village.
Well, I'd like to thank you and the good folks that you brought with you today for being kind enough to want to come over here and be with us. And I guess what we'll do is we'll just talk about the Exodus sculpture here for just a moment. This is one of our, the pieces that we have here that we enjoy most for people to see. It is a Willard stone sculpture, and it is priceless. And what this represents is the Cherokees, their fight and their struggle along the Trail of Tears, and he tried to capture it as much as he could in the walnut piece that you see here. And we're very proud of it, and it is an original, and it is for folks to come and see, as they do every day during the year, because our museum is open each and every day. Right now I'm going to bring on Lisa Finley, as she's I'm kind of the ugly side of this team, and she's kind of the other side. But what we're going to do is that Lisa is going to actually kind of take us through today the museum, the ancient village, and the Trail of Tears drama, and tell us each thing about it as we go through. As we say, we're starting here at the entry, and we'll just walk right on through the museum. And Lisa, what all are we going to look at in here? What's in here in the museum today?
Well, thank you, John. What we're going to take a look at is some of the past history of the Cherokee, which I'm sure you all covered in Tennessee also. But this will give you an idea of the way we depict it here in Tahlequah and bring you right up to date to the Cherokee Nation of how it is today.
Okay, and I guess we ought to get started without any further ado. Let's just walk on through and we'll see what we have today.
Where we are standing right now is in front of some of our exhibits. What the Cherokee National Museum basically does is allow our visitors to come through at their own pace and go through, and we have many audio and video things that they are able to see. So if you are a visitor coming to the museum, you're able to spend as much time as you want without any hurry at all. What I'm standing in front of right now is a display that we have at the very entrance of our museum, and this basically shows where all the Cherokee and all the other Indian tribes, the 5 civilized tribes, came from, where they lived, and where they moved to. So this gives the visitor a chance to get an idea of what they're going through and where they are headed. Here at the Cherokee National Museum, we also present the Trail of Tears Art Show. This year was the 18th annual one. At the Trail of Tears Art Show, it allows many people from all over America, all the way into Canada also, to present their works. Many fine artists from all over the place come here. This is a fine example of some of the things that we're getting ready to put up. The Trail of Tears Art Show this year just closed July 9th. Also, we have many other art shows exhibited throughout the year. This year, I believe we're getting ready to do 6 of them. So this is something of interest to our visitors. It allows them to see many Native American pieces displayed here at the museum and also see many of the other fine works that we have here year-round. This particular section of our museum is the prehistoric section of the museum. It basically depicts the Cherokees and shows them back thousands of years in the North American continent. What we try to do here is display many of their arts and crafts and many of their tools that they used at that time. All the way back into the archaic period, you can see that many of the Cherokees and many of the other tribes also were very civilized. They used tools, they had crafts, and in this section of the museum it gives the visitor a chance to see what they were like back then.
Okay, here we see a simulated dig. Wished you would notice the tools that are used by the craftsmen that are gifted in making a dig. Note the fire pit as how it has been exposed by trowel, not pick and shovel necessarily, but by paintbrush, trowel, layer by layer. Notice particularly in the side walls of the dig, the various layers. You will note from this area even seashells from that particular area. You will note seashells that were not even necessarily, this was not near an ocean, and no doubt coming from the Ice Age. How fantastic, how wonderful history. The actual earth speaks if you take the time to listen.
This display area depicts the Cherokees around the 18th century. This is the time right around European contact. Many people don't realize that at the time of European contact, then and just a little bit after, the Cherokees became very civilized people. They wore white people's clothes, they adapted their crafts, their tools, they worked in a white society, they lived in white people's houses. This area kind of tells the story of them in South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, which you all covered in Tennessee. This particular display I think will be of great interest. This is a display that talks about Tahlequah. Tahlequah was a man who devised an alphabet for the Cherokee. It was called his syllabary. It consisted of 82 characters, which you can see right here. One of the most interesting things about Tahlequah and about his alphabet was that he could take an illiterate Cherokee and teach them the alphabet and how to read and write and speak Cherokee fluently in about 8 weeks. A little bit later on, over here in our rural village, you will be meeting our character Tahlequah here in Tahlequah. What many people don't realize about the Cherokees, and I think they get this idea from watching movies or just Indians in general, is that they don't have very much fun. Well, that's not very true. Here behind me shows an example of some of the recreational tools that the Cherokee have. One example is the stickball. You can see this over here to my far right. This is a game that goes back hundreds of years, and it is played still up today. You know, we've played it backstage here at the theater, right here on the grounds. Stickball is a very interesting game. As a matter of fact, most people, unlike football in our culture today, that's a men's sport. Stickball was both men and women, and the thing about stickball is women got an advantage. They were able to use their hands. Men had to use these little sticks over here, and it's a tossing game with these sticks. And also, over here, I'd like to discuss some of the baskets with you. This is a Cherokee art form, and it's also used as tools. Right here to my right, you can see this little bitty basket right here. This is also a basket that is used as a drinking cup. Their baskets were woven so tightly and so carefully that they had many, many purposes and uses, not only just for carrying things, but also used in everyday drinking and eating and many other forms. Another thing that the Cherokee had that was very interesting started out in about 1828. That was called the Cherokee Phoenix. It was their very own newspaper. It was written both in Cherokee and English, and its editor was Elias Boudinot, which I'm sure some of you all are very familiar with. To my right here is a press. About 10 years later, and I believe it was on this press that this happened, was printed another newspaper called the Cherokee Advocate. And the Cherokee Advocate is still alive and still published today right here in Tahlequah in the Cherokee Nation. Right here to my right, we have several examples of the Cherokee Advocate. This is the newspaper that I discussed a little bit with you earlier. Also here in the museum, you may find of interest, too, that we have many actual notes and actual documents and actual letters that were written at that particular time and prior to the Advocate's time that depicts some of the correspondence and some of the publications that went on among the Cherokee people. Also right here is a picture of Rose Cottage. I don't know whether he's going to get that. Yeah, there he goes, right there. This was John Ross's house when he came into Indian Territory. Some of you may find of interest that this is a very southern, very aristocratic home. John Ross had slaves, as did many of the Cherokees when they came into Indian Territory. Also in this display case, you will also find some of the silver and some of the cut glass and many of the other things that John Ross did have in his home. So the Cherokees were not just Indians that lived in teepees or lived in poor housing. They were very affluent in their society at that particular time. The Cherokees also were in the conflict of the Civil War. This is something that I'm going to let John tell you a little bit about if he'll come over here to me. He's our military buff here at the Cherokee National Museum, so I'm going to let him talk about it.
Thanks, Lisa. I don't know how big a military buff I am or not, but since I have a degree in United States history, I've always taken kind of a profound interest in the Civil War. One of the things that I always like to tell folks in relationship to, what was the war like in this part of the country is that no, there were not the battles of Gettysburg or Antietam or Shiloh that we're familiar with from history, but in this area it was more like, I guess you would think of maybe like a Vietnam. It was guerrilla warfare here, where the Cherokee Confederate soldiers under the distinguished leadership of General Stand Watie, they fought against Union forces nearly every day. So by the end of the war, there were no young men left in the Cherokee Nation. As a matter of fact, it's generally regarded that from the ages of 14 on through about 60 years of age, there were no men left alive. And so all you had were young boys and the very, very old men. One of the things that we have here in our Civil War display case is General Stand Watie was presented a pocket knife that he carried with himself during the entire war, and this little pocket knife is called a Jim Bowie knife. And I don't know how big your pockets would actually have to be, but this is an original Jim Bowie forged by Jim Bowie that was given to General Watie by a friend of his. And he carried this knife, which I guess most of us would refer to as just a very small sword, throughout the war. And it is one of our it's one of our choice pieces that we have in our Civil War display area.
John just mentioned to you a little bit about Stand Watie, and I mentioned a little bit earlier about the man John Ross. I think now would be a good time to tell you folks who those people are. John Ross was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation in the removal of the 1839s. Stand Watie was ahead of the removal in 1835. What happened was Stand Watie came to Indian Territory first, as I said, in 1835. John Ross came with his group second in 1839, which, as you might think, would cause a little bit of a conflict. Yes, they were both Cherokee, but at that particular time in 1835 when Stand Watie came here, he had already set up his home and his people had already pretty much established themselves in Indian Territory. So by 1839, when the principal chief John Ross brought his group over here, there were conflicts that arose between who was principal chief, who wasn't, and what was going to happen and how this was going to be settled, who was going to be head and who was not. John Ross was very strong at remaining neutral. He wanted to keep his Cherokee Indians together. He wanted to keep them living their own civilized life as one Cherokee people. Stand Watie wanted to keep them more civilized in the white society, I suppose you might say. When the Civil War conflict arose, Stand Watie wanted very much for all the Cherokee people to support the Confederate troops. As I said before, John Ross wanted to remain neutral, and that was another major conflict that arose between these two factions of people. And as it may be of interest to you also, Stand Watie was one of the last Confederate generals to surrender from the Civil War. We are now outside of the Cherokee National Museum in our little plaza area. Right behind me you see 3 columns. These 3 columns were on the south side of the actual female seminary that was right here on this spot in Park Hill. The female seminary was built in 1851, and its basic concept was to educate the Cherokee women at that time. It was done for them to be educators, for them to be teachers. The structure burned in 1887, and all that was left were these 3 remaining columns. There were actually 25 columns that were on the east and south sides of the seminary at that time, but these are the only 3 that were left. We also have a seminary here in Tahlequah that was built after this one burned. It is at the Northeastern State University campus, which is also known for its education. People go there to become teachers, so the female seminary is still carrying on at this time. It was approximately 185 feet long, and it was 2 to 3 stories high. I stated earlier that the columns were on the east and south sides. They were actually on the east, south, and west sides. These are the south columns of the seminary. The bricks that the columns are made out of were procured right here in this area and also fired by local Cherokee craftsmen. I guess now would be a good time to tell you that we are leaving the Cherokee National Museum and getting ready to enter our rural village, which is right over here, right behind me. We have now stepped into Adams Corner Rural Village here at the Cherokee National Museum. This place depicts a crossroads community at the time of about 1875 to 1890. What generally was in a community like that was a post office, which was its main central location, a general store, several log cabins, a schoolhouse, and a church. What we've done here in this little replica of a village is taken many actual structures from around Indian Territory and placed them here in the village. We can walk around here in a few minutes if you wish. We have a schoolhouse over here, a general store, several log cabins, and just generally a basic little community. One thing too about the rural village is these structures are fairly close together. In actual Indian Territory, they were not quite this close together because many of the people did farming and work on their land. So as you can imagine, there would be quite a bit more space. Of interest to the general store over here at the Adams Corner Rural Village, we actually sell many things that were sold in that particular time frame. We sell rock candy and tobacco and all sorts of interesting things that people might be interested in. The school over here during the summertime, we generally try to have a school marm over here, and what she does will teach kids who come to visit the museum several words in Cherokee, several ways of spelling things in Cherokee, and give them just a little bit of a lesson on what Sequoyah did at the time prior to this community. We have now entered the Cherokee Schoolhouse. Some of you kids out there are probably going, yuck, I don't want to watch this. But actually, you will find this probably very interesting. Right over here to my right, you will see Sequoyah's syllabary right up here on the chalkboard. Also, you see some Cherokee words written out. So for some of you folks who want to say hello to somebody out there in Cherokee, you can see over here, OCO. That's hello to all your friends in Cherokee. And for dog, you can say Geely, and for cat, you can say Wesa. They're your 3 words in Cherokee for your interest. Behind me, you can see, just like today, when you go to school, they sing. They had their lessons on the chalkboard just like you, and sat in desks just like you folks did out there when you went to school at your time. So this is an actual Cherokee little crossroads community schoolhouse. We have just now entered the Adams Corner General Store. Right here behind me is our little storekeeper. His name is Tony. You want to say hi to the folks?
Hi to the folks.
Okay, thanks, Tony. As I told you earlier about what we have in the store, you can kind of see it all right up here on the counter. We sell all sorts of candy and all sorts of dry goods over here. We have them fixed up just particularly for our store. Also over here, you probably can't see this, but to my far right over here is the post office. I discussed with you earlier that these little crossroads communities generally did have a post office. Many times they were actually in the general stores, so people could come to town in the morning, mail their mail, pick up their mail, and get their groceries for the day without any problem whatsoever. So this is our Adams Corner General Store. I'm now standing in front of a log cabin here in Adams Corner Rural Village. It might be of your interest to know that this log cabin was actually taken from Lost City and reconstructed right here in our rural village. Also, you might be interested to know at the time period of Sequoyah, this would be a cabin in which Sequoyah might actually live in. Not saying that this was his cabin, but it is a cabin of that time period. So now would be a good time, I think, to introduce to you our character Sequoyah. He is Sequoyah in the Trail of Tears drama, and he is played by Tim Johnson. Sequoyah, would you like to come out and join us? How are you, Sequoyah?
Just fine. How are you, Lisa?
Just fine. What I'd like for you to do is tell us just a little bit about yourself and your alphabet.
I'd love to. As far back as I can remember, I was fascinated by the white man's ability to communicate by the written word, to record his speech and thoughts on paper, something I refer to as the talking leaves. I realized that the Cherokee people were at a great disadvantage because of our lack of a written language, so I set about to develop a way to do this. As you may know, I myself could not read or write in any language. My only clues were those that I was able to decipher by picking up bits and pieces of the white man's newspaper on the roadside. It soon, could you hold that up a little bit? Thank you. It soon became obvious to me that this system that the white man used would not work for our language, the Cherokee language. Consequently, I developed what is now referred to as a syllabary, in which each symbol in the syllabary represents a complete sound or syllable in the Cherokee language. It took me 12 years to develop. Many people indeed during this time laughed at me. They thought I was crazy. They said that I was a fool. In fact, the name Sequoyah sometimes is still actually translated as meaning fool. Finally, the syllabary was complete. I realized that I would have to convince the leaders of our nation that it was an effective tool in order for the rest of our people to accept it. I remember that meeting very well. I had called John Ross and Stan Rady, and several others were present, and I decided that a demonstration perhaps would be the best way to convince them. I had taught my young daughter, who was at that time 11 years old, how to use our syllabary, how to use my syllabary. What I decided to do was have her leave the room. Rather, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me pick that up. Okay. I explained that I would leave the room, at which time they were to give a message to my daughter, whom I had, of course, taught the syllabary. When I returned to the room, I read aloud to them the message she had given in Cherokee. Well, their reaction was astounding. And from that point on, the syllabary was widely accepted by our people. Many people became able to use it in a matter of only 2 or 3 weeks, and we went from a nation that was completely illiterate to one that could communicate our thoughts and preserve our history, just as the white man was able to. And I went from being a fool to a hero.
Well, thank you, Sequoyah. From this alphabet, one thing that may be mentioned is that by Sequoyah's alphabet, the Cherokee people were able to have schools, churches, and as I mentioned earlier in the museum, they were also able to have their own newspaper. They had a Congress, a legislature, and they were able to act within the white society. So because of Sequoyah, we were made a very, very civilized tribe. Once again, I'd like to introduce John Justice to you. He is going to act as a little bit of an interviewer here for you folks and kind of give you an overview of what we do over here in the drama and some of the relationships between the eastern and western bands of the Cherokee between Tim Johnson and myself.
Thank you, Lisa. First off, I have been in the drama over the past 11 seasons, and in so doing, you kind of get where you pick up a little bit of education about the Cherokee people just by osmosis, if nothing else. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, Tim, is that you know, in the drama, we try to portray it as close to history as possible, and I know that Stan Wady and John Ross had an awful lot of trouble when Ross and the group known and was, you know, I guess tragically given the name the Trail of Tears, when they arrived. What were some of the problems that in history that occurred between Stan Wady and John Ross?
That's a big question, John. I guess the main thing that stands out in my mind was the extreme division that occurred amongst the Cherokee people under the leadership of those two men. One, as you stated, having come earlier in 35, and the other one later in 39.
Well, you know what? Let me ask you, just taking it like Sequoia's role in this, since you're obviously play the role of Sequoia, obviously you would have a tendency to lean more towards what Sequoia believed and what he wanted to see happen. And also, we can kind of theorize, too, as to what Sequoia wished would have happened, especially with the murders of Wade's family.
Absolutely.
Maybe if we go that route with it.
Okay. Well, I suppose it would be most accurate to say, from my viewpoint anyway, that Sequoia functioned as an intermediary, a mediator between Ross and Wade. He seemed to me to be the glue that held the nation together when those two factions were pulling so far left, right, however you want to express it. Sequoia was there in the middle going, wait a minute, gentlemen, wait a minute, people. We are going to tear our nation apart if we don't manage to maintain some kind of cohesiveness amongst all this turmoil. And he was highly revered enough that I feel, and history bears this out for the most part, that he was able to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, kind of not maybe necessarily doing the flip side, but Lisa, the role of Anawake, and this is where I guess, for lack of a better term, we can tell the folks, watching now that the role of Anawake is fictitious. That lady did not exist, and but what we try to portray in the drama is that she represents kind of like all Cherokee women at that time. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think that's probably a fair assumption. We didn't state before, but I do play the role of Anawake in the drama. And what my character basically does is give the folks an overview of what a woman might feel like in the struggles of that time. She is a character who was caught kind of in between the Ross faction and the Wade faction. She came over here in the removal of 1835, so she was here early. And then the Ross faction came in, and she was in love with a member of the Ross party.
So there we kind of set up the Romeo and Juliet, maybe part of the show that I know the audiences over the years seems to really enjoy.
Exactly, and as a woman's role, I mean, I can speak for myself today. It's really hard for a woman to watch a conflict that she has no control over. When people are fighting, or even in our government structure today, when there are troubles going on, you kind of feel helpless. And I think the role of Anawake kind of shows that helplessness and that feeling that she wants everything to work out okay, but she also wants herself to be happy, and she wants all the Cherokee people to be together and happy.
One of the historical aspects of the drama that we do bring out is the after John Ross and his folks arrived in Indian Territory, a terrible event took place of which Sequoia was right. I mean, he was right in the middle of it, and that was the murder of Stan Wade's family. And boy, Stan Wade just got away, I guess, just barely, because he was informed by one of the Ross followers that his murder was imminent. And so who were the men that were killed, and how important were they to the Cherokee Nation?
Well, the three men were Elias Boudnot, Major Ridge, and his son, John Ridge.
And these were all Wade's relatives, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. All three, particularly Elias Boudnot and Major Ridge as well, very important men in the functioning and carrying on of the Cherokee government, as it were.
And Tim,
greatly missed and a huge loss to the Cherokee Nation at that time.
All right, and the reason that they were killed is because early on, before the removals, there was a law in the Cherokee Nation that said no Cherokee Indian could sell land to any white man, and that was called the blood law.
That's right, and they unfortunately had, according to their brother Cherokee, violated that law.
And so after their arrival, some followers of John Ross and actually got together, and they kind of formed a vigilante group, and they sought out these three men and indeed put them to death, and exercising that law of it's a capital crime if any Cherokee sold land to any white man back in Georgia. And so those that law was carried out here, and we portray that in our first act.
Very vividly. And we might mention here that the way you've just detailed this is sort of the crux of what the problem was with the Cherokee at that time. The division between whether to abide by the old Cherokee ways and be limited by not being able to function in the white man's society, or to become more integrated into the white man's society and in turn, unfortunately, lose the old Cherokee ways.
That's correct. Now, Lisa, in the second act, it's a lot of the show obviously revolves around the Civil War, and we end up with statehood in 1907. Kind of briefly tell everybody a little bit about, exactly what it feels like, or that may be unfair. What happens to Onawake in that second act?
The second act for the show starts out as a very lively section in history. It's as we saw earlier, the female seminary was going on, and it starts out with a seminary dance, and everybody's very happy. We find out right after that Onawake's character, her uncle Stan Wadey, comes on, and we find out that all around this area people are joining up with us, which is something John Ross really does want to avoid. This makes her very distraught, because she really is supporting Ross's side, because she is now married to a member of Ross's party, and she still wants to support her uncle because he is still her uncle. So she's caught once again in that same conflict. A little bit later on in the second act, we find that Onawake's husband Benjamin gets murdered. And he is murdered basically because of this struggle, this conflict that arose because of the Civil War, because of Wadey wanting to join the Southern Confederacy, because Benjamin supported Ross. He gets murdered, and she immediately goes to blame her uncle, which in all aspects of the show, he really didn't want him to be murdered. He didn't want Benjamin to be murdered, but he was murdered. That the fact still remains, and she is very upset by that. And the show basically ends with kind of a truce coming between Onawake and her uncle, and 1907 arriving, and everything's happy and joyful once again, basically.
And Oklahoma, and we'll just close with that, and Oklahoma becomes a state in the federal union.
We have now entered the Cherokee Heritage Center's ancient village. We are very proud of our village here. This depicts the life of the Cherokees in about the 1600s, just prior to European contact. One thing that we like to see here at the ancient village from our visitors is when they come into this village, most people usually think of Indians as living in teepees and riding horses and living a lifestyle like, I suppose, what you see on movies. Well, for the Cherokee Indians, this is not true. This is not the case. As you can see right behind me, you can see one of our huts. This is an actual hut just like the Cherokees would have lived in at this particular time frame. They lived a very, very civilized lifestyle as compared to what people generally think of. So visitors are very surprised to see this. We are now, once again, like I said, in the ancient village, and as you can see, this is a living museum, is basically what this structure is and what this represents. Right here standing to my right, I have our village manager. Her name is Anna Ratcliffe. She is the one that kind of heads up everything that goes on out here. Would you like to say hi, Anna?
Hi.
Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask her a few questions. She's going to answer me back as to what goes on around this village. We're standing in front of a hut right here. Would you like to tell us what kind of hut this is and kind of what it represents?
Okay. This is a hut of an elder, like a teacher of the village. He makes all the tools that we see here, like your bows and arrows, which are made out of river cane and bow dart. And then all the young guys that want to learn to do these things come to him.
Okay. What does he make? Just a little bit of everything? Like what do we see in front of us here?
We see blowguns, bow and arrows, stickball sticks, a spoon, baskets, the arrowheads, and carvings.
Okay. So basically what his thing to do here is to kind of instruct some of the young folks around the villages to get them on their own and to help be able to take care of themselves and their family. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll be moving on to the next hut then. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sam. Looks like we have some pretty interesting stuff going on here, Anna. Would you like to tell us what this lady right here is doing?
Okay, this is Lena, and she makes a kunachi, and it's made from hickory nuts. She pounds them into this rock, and then she picks out the bigger hulls, and then the meat of it she puts in the stump over there, and then she pounds it with that stick over there, and then the oil from the hickory nut comes out, and then as you pound, you will form it into a ball, and then you will drop the hickory nut ball into a boiling water, and then you will again sift the bigger hulls from that. Back then, it was like a famine food, which if their gardens didn't grow, they could live on that for months at a time. But now it's still enjoyed, and we add rice and hominy and sugar now.
Well, that sounds great. Would you like to tell us what we've got behind us here, as far as any of this stuff goes?
This is it's called an OC, and which is a winter home. They would have built a fire all day in there, and the evening time they would rake out the embers and coals, and then they would sleep our family would sleep in there.
So this was to keep people warm, basically, for the winter?
Yes. This is a winter home, and this was a summer home.
Well, very good. Thanks, Anna. As I mentioned earlier, when we were in the Cherokee National Museum, one of the big recreational things for the Cherokees is stickball. So we are now right in the middle of a stickball field, and I'm out here with Chris, and he's going to tell us a little bit about stickball. Chris, what do you have to say?
Okay, stickball, it was a very rough game. It was a supplement for war sometimes. Instead of fighting over hunting grounds, many times they'd play a game of stickball. Stickball had no rules except the men had to use sticks. The women were not allowed to play until the 1800s. And when they finally were allowed to play, they did not have to use sticks. They could literally do anything to the men they wanted. And now the men had two rules. They had to use sticks and they could not touch the women.
I like that.
Yeah, most women do. And now you know who made the rules, pretty much. Okay, the object of the game was to hit the fish on top of the pole. And if you hit it, 4 points were scored. If you hit the pole, 1 point was scored. The ball you see here is made from deer skin, deer hair, and in the middle is a small stone for weight. The sticks are made of different kinds of wood. They're shaved and they're wet so they can be bent over and tied with a piece of deer skin.
Well, thank you, Chris. Do you like to play stickball?
Yes, I like it.
Do you guys play out here much?
Some. I demonstrate for my tourists if you'd like to see one.
Sure, go right ahead. Can you get this on film? Okay. Oh, that was good. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. This is probably my favorite section of our ancient village. I'm standing right here in front of our blowgun demonstration area, and this is also where they make the blowguns. This is a tool that the Cherokee used. I'm going to let Anna tell you just a little bit more about that, and then we'll have an actual blowgun demonstration.
Okay, this is a hut for the blowgun, and the blowguns are made out of river cane. When they first pick it, they're not straight, so they have to heat it and bend it over their knees to get it straight and hull out the insides. And then they will make the darts made out of bow dart. They shave the bow dart down, and then they use the thistle at the end, the downs of the thistle.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is I've got Dwayne sitting right here behind me, and I believe he's going to shoot one off for us. Go ahead and do another one.
All right.
Nick, explosion of air. Dwayne, tell him how to do it.
Very good.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
That was good. As I also mentioned in the museum earlier, a thing that the Cherokees also do and do very well is that's their basket weaving. I'm going to let Anna tell you a little bit about how the Cherokees weave the baskets and also how you can tell a Cherokee basket from just a regular basket. So Anna, if you'd like to discuss that with us.
Okay, baskets are made from honeysuckle, buckbrush, white oak splint, and maple and willow. They are gathered in the fall. They're boiled and stripped, and then your dyes would become from like bloodroot, walnut, and berries. And you start out with 12 spokes, 6 over 6, and you start in a circular motion, and then you go on 2 by 2s. And then the longer the spokes, the bigger your baskets will be.
Okay, Anna, what do we see on the bottom of the basket here?
Okay, we see 6 over 6, and that's how you can tell it's a Cherokee basket. Will be crossed at the bottom.
And this is just pretty much for the Cherokees, and that is their signature piece.
Yes, and a double wall.
Great, and that makes it stronger, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Here is that we try to depict this thing as near to the way it would have been, and actually, with the number of huts that we have in here, this would have been. Now, this wouldn't have been one of the, obviously one of the larger ones, but this would have been like a kind of pretty, this would have been, because this would have held a couple of 300 people when you count the children and all that, and, moms and dads and everything else. It wouldn't be far off from the actual size. One of the things that's real interesting is that the Cherokees, the 5 civilized tribes, were very large nations. A lot of people, we always have this thing in mind about John Wayne and going out and fighting the 40 or 50 Apaches, and everybody cries, I love, she wore a yellow ribbon, everybody does. But what that's done is that everybody had a tendency to group Indian people like, well, they're all exactly the same. They all wear hairdresses, and they all, act very stoic and never had a good time.
All of our basis for forming opinions of Indians is all formed by what Hollywood does with the representation on the screen.
And see,
most of the other history is lost.
Well, most of the time we have people coming in here wanting to where are their teepees. I've had a number of people come through. You mean, well, but where's their teepees? And well,
I said that earlier.
They don't live in it.
Well, you have now seen a little bit about the living establishments of the Cherokee at this time period. As you can tell, as I stated earlier, there are no teepees. The Cherokees were not nomadic. They were very stabilized people. This is an actual village, or a replica of an actual village, should I say, that would be about the same size and about the same structure as what would have been back then. Now we're going to let Chris get us a little bit into the more ceremonial side of what went on with the Cherokees in this time period, and probably still up until today. So I'll let Chris handle this.
Okay, these are the ceremonial grounds, or the stomp grounds. This is where they would obviously have their stomp dances. These would be done in a counterclockwise motion because these were religious. They did not dance just for joy. Their dances, most of them were Thanksgiving dances for such as a good hunt, warriors returning safely, Thanksgiving for a good crop, things such as that. I want to point out here that there are 7 arbors. These 7 arbors would seat 7 clans of the Cherokee. These 7 clan names were the Deer Clan, which is mine, the Wolf, Bird, Blue, Paint, Long Hair, and Wild Potato. The dances would be done in a counterclockwise motion around the fire to show the religious purpose, and these grounds would always be swept clean. The 4 logs you see around the fire are facing in the 4 directions of the earth. It's believed that the earth was held up by 4 directional poles, and these logs represent those directions, which are the north, south, east, and west directions.
You stated earlier just a second ago that there has to be a lead dancer to do a dance. What exactly is his purpose?
He starts the chants. He mainly says the words of the songs, which are the meanings of the songs. The chants have different meanings.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like to state that goes on out here, or any other?
No, this is about it.
Okay. Well, then we'll just take it on over to the council house then, I guess. Chris and I have probably entered the most important building into the village, and I'm going to let Chris discuss with you what goes on in this particular building.
Okay, this is the council house. This is the government center of the village. This is where they would establish any laws or regulations that they would have. This is where they would settle conflicts. It could be like a courtroom. This is where they have their wedding ceremonies. This is where some burials would, where they would have some burials. The wedding ceremonies, they'd be held by the medicine man. He'd carry a staff such as this one, which is curved at the top. He'd bring a man and woman in here. A man would have a leg of deer inside of a blanket. A woman would have a basket of corn in a blanket. These blankets would be tied together, and they would be married. Divorces were very rare in the Cherokee tribe, and if they ever wanted one, they could simply come back and have the blankets untied. Usually was a woman's choice. They would have the blankets untied, and they would go their own separate ways, the man starting over, the woman keeping everything.
Can I ask you a quick question here? What exactly, we haven't discussed a medicine man. What is his purpose?
He was the medicine man, the doctor of the village, and he's also the high priest of the village.
So did he play a pretty important role around, like in the council house and things that went on?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Okay. As far as settling conflicts would go, that would the judging would be done by the council, and it'd be held, like I said, much like a courtroom. Okay, the fire you see here in the middle is one of the important sacred flames of the village. It's known as the ever-burning flame. It's believed that this flame ever goes out, that some kind of death or destruction will come to the village. Okay, the walls of this building are 7-sided, and they have 7 bleachers to seat the 7 clans. There are 7 peace symbols around the top to bring peace to each clan. The holes in the sides are strictly for ventilation, and the door is always facing the east. The reason for this is meetings could go several days, and they always knew it was a new day when they saw the sun rise in the east. Okay, we have our 4 directional logs around the fire again, and we have our captive pole. If a person were captured in a battle, they would be brought back here and tied to this pole, and the women of the village would decide what would become of them.
Did they ever kill them?
That would be the most harsh punishment.
Okay, so basically they just kept them here to try to get information from them, or because they did some terrible wrong?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's not.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. We are now going to be leaving our ancient village here at the Cherokee Heritage Center, and I would really like to express my thanks for the help of Chris and Anna and all the folks that work here in the village. And now I suppose we're going to be heading over to the theater to do a little bit more talking over there. So thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure going through the Cherokee Heritage Village, seeing actual living conditions as they were in the 1900s. And it's something I know you would enjoy. It's not often that I truly recommend, and with almost insistence, that you visit a place. I tell you what, they'll steal your heart away. You'll love it. And with me here are the leading roles of the play that happened here in this beautiful amphitheater, with Tim and Lisa playing the part of Sequoia and Anawa. And I just want you two to know it's been a pleasure being with you today. I feel right at home here, and I know anyone that comes is going to enjoy seeing the play. Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
How difficult is it to get to the amphitheater, say from Tahlequah, parking, that sort of thing? Easy to find?
Very easy to find, very easy to get here. What are we, about approximately 2.5 miles from downtown Tahlequah? We have plenty of signs, follow the arrows, very easy to get to. Parking is very ample and lots of room for buses and whatever you're in.
Real good. I know we brought a Greyhound bus over ourselves with our crew, and we had no problem whatsoever.
We love to see them.
Well, great. And I want to promise all of you right now, in the very near future, we've given permission to film the entire 2-hour segment of that great play, The Trail of Tears. I think it's something that we should have in our documentary files. It was a point and a time in American history that we should never forget. And the dear hearts that traveled that trail, as these two, I know, so aptly portray that role. Dear ones, we're going to film that, and you're going to be there. Meanwhile, I would say, if you have nothing planned for the rest of this year, a trip to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, a trip to Loudoun County, Tennessee, follow the Trail of Tears. Put yourself in that position. Think back. 8,000 years history dates back in Loudoun County. And then the gathering together and what the Cherokees have done for this great state, Oklahoma. I know you'll enjoy it. And again, Tim, Lisa, God bless you both. We're going to really look forward to seeing your program in the very near future.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
And that is a tie-up for this documentary. Hey, you know what? I think I've enjoyed doing this documentary more than anyone that we've done. We thank John Justice for his hospitality. We thank Tim and Lisa. And hey, you're treated real good in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, the home of the red man, the home of the Cherokees, the home of the 5 civilized tribes. God bless you. I hope you've enjoyed it too. America, you were there. All right, this is going to be real special. It's real special to me. It touches my heart. Lisa, who plays one of the leads in this program in that beautiful language of the Cherokees, our theme song, Amazing Grace. Lisa, God bless you.
Thank you. Une klana iu weji iga guya hona nagu josa wiu lo se iga guya